I decided that I would somehow weave the story of the lost footage into the film, as a symbol of my fixation as a filmmaker on the possibility of preserving something which will inevitably be lost. I decided to edit my movie to look like an archived Hollywood film, of which sections were destroyed or eroded and replaced with descriptive intertitles. Postmodernism had once again rescued me from senseless tragedy. But the feedback during the group critiques was consistently negative. It took me several rough cuts to reconcile with the fact that my audiences just didn't like being reminded of what's missing. They just wanted to see the story. It was only after a long talk with my boyfriend at the time that I realized the current structure was actually undermining my intentions. By giving such weight to the missing film, I was actually taking attention away from the subject and suggesting that my main concern was not my grandmother. The first rough cut, which treated the story as if there was no film missing, received remarkably better responses. So I continued down that path, and the final version, which I screened in the great hall of my school as my senior project, was not what I once thought it could be, but it was the grandest thing I had done till that point. It's also the first time in which I compromised between my artistic vision and the desires of my audience. The positive reception of the film made my reservations easy to repress, but deep inside, I was profoundly disillusioned. The loss of my Super 8 film could not be given artistic meaning. Apparently, some disasters were just that, disasters, and nothing good could be made of them. Coinciding with the fine editing of the film during my senior year was a secondary project. I had found myself with almost a whole year to go and no ideas for art projects. I stepped back, thought to myself, what is a hard-working art student to do when she has no art to make? And I decided that the only logical step is to do the work of those who do have art to make. I put up flyers around my school advertising my free help to any art student who could use it. I got a trickle of respondents and documented each job I did. This manual labor for my fellow students was the only other art I was doing during the editing of the documentary about my grandmother. But throughout it all, I was reflecting deeply and experienced a revelation. The reason I had started making art in the first place was to gain approval from those around me. Suddenly, I saw all of my past creations in the new light of my low self-esteem. Before long, the entire art school institution became implicated in this ego-driven rat race. Who said it was right to judge people based on their intellectual creations anyway? Relinquishing the right to make art became a personal crusade, and I secretly considered myself a bold critic of the special status given to artists. I presented the documentation of this voluntary work project in PowerPoint form to my professor. Simultaneously, I gave a speech which argued for the validity of doing the manual labor for other people's art as a way of earning credits in art school. In my case, 3 credits that were crucial for me to graduate. In effect, I also declared that from here on forward, I would shed the title of artist. I would stop creating art, and I would find out who I really was underneath. I filmed this PowerPoint presentation and called it, appropriately, my last art project. My boyfriend was nervous throughout this entire process. He was suspicious of the absolutism of my decision, and argued that I should examine closely why I suddenly feel art to be so burdensome. He himself is a musician, so I took his discomfort with my decision as a sign that he felt his own livelihood was being threatened. I insisted to Cole repeatedly that this was about me finding an authentic and lasting happiness. My last art project turned out to be the perfect work of art with which to end my time at Cooper Union. Not only did it nicely sum up 4 years of art schooling and showcase many of my classmates and their creative practices, it was wonderfully postmodern and argued against the very paradigm which created it. But it was still a work of art, 13 minutes on a videotape that I showed in a critique, and for which I got feedback, almost unanimously positive feedback, I might add. The trouble started right around graduation. The irony in my parting statement became lost on me, and I stepped into the story I had told. Or rather, I stepped out of a story entirely, because my building obsession was with living life rather than recording it. In the beginning of the summer, when the doctors first advised me that something was wrong, I did not believe them. Quite the contrary. I had not had my period for a few years, and unhampered by that monthly Achilles heel, I felt like something of a superwoman. The doctor's visits for a long while were merely an inconvenience to be tolerated for my mother's sake. However, there was a discrete moment in time, after the diagnosis and long after the symptoms first appeared, when I stopped being a healthy woman and became a sick woman. Similarly, when I first started reading the Shema and the Psalms, it was in order to put my mother's soul at ease. Only later did I become obsessed with my loss of faith. Though I tried to reassure my parents by augmenting my diet, I stubbornly resisted their suggestions that I have an eating disorder. At some point, however, I could no longer look in the mirror approvingly without simultaneously feeling that I was measuring myself against the unhealthy standards set by the media. For a long time, I had been particular about the healthfulness of what I put in my body. Now, my choosiness was obsession. For years, I had been diligent about regular exercise. Now I was neurotic. Refusing to write my own script, life quickly stepped up to do it for me. Even my breakup with my boyfriend of over 2 years, by its very nature, resisted being put into a story. When Cole had left, a part of me breathed a sigh of relief. I no longer had to be subject to his criticisms, his judgments, his scrutiny. But in the absence of this last looking-glass constantly by my side, the world became quite a bit darker and more bewildering. The events I've described have all culminated. Since then, much has transpired, but I can't seem to make sense of it. After making up all the work I had lost on my ruined hard drive, my second hard drive fell off a table. The contents were unrecoverable. I'm on the pill. I haven't found God. I haven't even found art. I would go on, but it would seem like the incoherent and bewildering muddle of details that we know of as real life. And this is supposed to be art. I have revised this piece every few weeks for a long time, trying to update it according to the latest developments in my health, my professional life, my family life, but I was never satisfied. I never had that eureka moment that accompanies all of my previous artworks, because I didn't know ultimately what the message was. So I've abandoned a message. Let this film serve as a warning to all of you art students about to leave the gallery and enter the blinding light of the real world. Don't question why you make art. Don't question its usefulness. Yes, you're addicted to the attention, to the approval, but only in the same way that we're addicted to the blood pumping oxygen to our vital organs. Don't stop, because if you do, I'm not sure you can return.